Why does Christianity seem to be a racist theology? Why does Christianity seem to be a racist doctrine? Um, it seems that way because the founding fathers of this country, America, were racist. But the question is why? Biblical Christianity is not a theology that promotes or advocates racism. Biblical Christianity was inclusive of all ethnic groups, all nationalities, all socioeconomic groups, males, female, all genders, etc. We experience a reformation in the second and third century AD when the patristical Christians began to reform biblical Christianity, what we refer to as primitive Christianity. And they reformed biblical Christianity because they wanted to divest themselves from the Jews, from being Jewish-like. We roll forward a little bit around the 6th, 7th century. We have an Armenian book called the Adam Books. We have a little note in this book where it talks about how Cain is cursed black by God because of what he did to his brother Abel. This makes its way into Jewish thought, Islamic thought, as well as Neo-Christian thought. And it's really a mistranslation of what we read in the Hebrew text. Cain's countenance became dark and he became saddened. And so you have the Jewish clergy, you have the Christians, you have Islamists who misinterpret this as meaning Cain was cursed to be black. So again, we have the impetus around the 6th century, from a book called the Adam Books that gives us a side note that this is the origin of the black race. They are a cursed race. Then we move forward. We have the curse of Ham theory. And in the curse of Ham theory, Ham looked upon his father Noah's nakedness, and Noah cursed him to be a servant of servants. So we now have a black person who is cursed to be in servitude for the rest of his life. He and his progeny, his children, his descendants. So this made its way into the church. The church began to teach that black people were cursed. Synagogues began to teach that black people were cursed. If you're black, you're only fit to be a servant, nothing more. And then it ramped up. It became more perverse. The intellectual capacity for black people only reached the degree of a 13-year-old. And so your Eastern Orthodox churches, a little bit later after the 6th or 7th century AD, the Roman Catholic Church, they began to embrace this and they taught it. We have the Anglican Church, the Lutheran Church that split from the Catholic Church. They carried this doctrine into their particular denomination, the Anglican Church. You then have the Methodist Church, the Baptist Church. So this places here in America, we have the Anglicans that come to this country. You have the Baptists who are in this country. You have the Methodists that are in this country. You have the Baptists and the Methodists breaking away from Anglicanism. And guess what they are carrying with them? They're carrying with them this myth that black people are the descendants of Cain. Black people are the descendants of Ham. And they are a cursed race of people with the intellectual capacity of a 13-year-old. Maimonides, a revered Jewish clergyman, talked about the ineptitude of black people, all black people. Humes talked about black people in a very disparaging way. You had many Christian leaders, scientists, archaeologists that published in journals how black people were very stupid, dumb, ignorant. Their intellectual capacity was extremely limited. So from the church and academia, from academia into government, civil politics, uh, local, municipal government, state, federal, is interwoven in the fabric of the country. From there, we transition to now people's homes, where you have mom and dad who is listening to this from the pastor, who are going to school and they're listening to this from school teachers, from professors. And what do? They go home and they teach this to their children. So America is founded upon racism. And the founders were your neo-Christian Protestants. And this is something that they really believed in. They would swear by this. So by this time, we have many Anglo-Saxons, white folks, who are rethinking this myth about black people. And they're saying, you know what? We disagree with the premise that black people are a subhuman species, because this is what was propagated. It's in many materials still to this very day. That black people are inhuman, subhuman, less than human, people who can only work in a service capacity, that they can only be slaves. So within the Baptist community, they argued about this. Southern Baptist says, no, we believe that black people are less than human. We believe that they are destined to be slaves based upon what's written in the Bible. The Baptist in the North says we disagree, so they break up. So now we have the Southern Baptist Convention that's represented by millions on top of millions. A lot of black people are in these Southern Baptist churches, and they will defend it only because they don't know the Southern Baptist history. So let's begin with the Southern Baptist. We gave the genesis in terms of how we got here and why it's still being perpetrated, mainly in the psyche of Anglo-Saxons, again, Caucasians, white people, in a very subtle manner. Racism is not something that is inherent. It's not something that is innate. Racism is something that is taught. And the clear majority of white people, and not just white people, but Asians and Hispanics and so forth, because it's a virus, have a negative perspective towards the black populace as a whole. Not everyone, not every white person, not every Asian person, not every Hispanic person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a large majority. And it's because of social, racial programming from birth, right? Let's look at this. This is a quote here from Nancy Tatum Ammerman. Southern Baptists observe multiple perspectives on a changing denomination. This is from page 148. This is what she writes. E.T. Winkler, pastor of a prominent church in South Carolina and Alabama, explained to Northern Baptists in 1872 why groups such as the Ku Klux Klan were justifiable. Although many within the Southern Baptists were supportive of slavery, racism, separation, and Jim Crow laws, they were not very supportive of the lynching and killings of blacks that escalated at an all-time high in the 1930s, prompted and fueled by the media and academia. The Southern Baptists often preached of blacks having some form of legal rights, but never social equality. The National Southern Baptist meetings passed resolutions deploring lynching, even as Southern Baptist pastors officiated at Ku Klux Klan funerals. So let's move forward. Southern Baptists, besides the Methodists, as a split from the Anglican and the Catholic Church, has morphed into being the pinnacle of racial Christianity, racial neo-Christianity. Emma Green is a writer for The Atlantic, and she is covering an event that just happened several years ago. This is what she writes. Emma Green reports on events at the most recent SBC, Southern Baptist Convention meeting. Green writes, the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting turned chaotic in Phoenix this week over a resolution that condemned white supremacy and the alt-right. On Tuesday, leaders initially declined to consider the proposal submitted by a prominent black pastor in Texas, Dwight McKissick, and only changed course after a significant backlash. On Wednesday afternoon, the body passed a revised statement against the alt-right, but the drama over the resolution revealed deep tension lines within a denomination, Baptist, that was explicitly founded to support slavery. Now, I would not say that that it was specifically founded to support slavery, but it morphed into really and truly a slave doctrine, a slave religion in the 17th latter part of the 17th century, 18th century. Well, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it to you to determine if you believe that Southern Baptists have changed. Okay, all right. Here's McKissick's resolution. He says, there has arisen in the United States a growing menace to political order and justice that seeks to reignite social animosities, reverse improvements in race relations, divide our people, and foment hatred, classism, and ethnic cleansing. And this toxic menace, self-identified among some of its chief proponents as white nationalism and the alt-right, must be opposed for the totalitarian impulses, xenophobic biases, and bigoted ideologies that infect the minds and actions of its violent disciples, and the roots of white supremacy within a Christian context. It is based on the so-called curse of Ham theory, once prominently taught by the SBC in the early years, echoing the belief that God through Noah ordained descendants of Africa to be subservient to Anglos, which provided a theological justification for slavery and segregation. The SBC officially renounces the curse of Ham theory in this resolution. Now be it therefore that the Southern Baptist Convention meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, June 13 through 14, 2017, denounces every form of nationalism that violates the biblical teachings with respect to race, justice, and ordered liberty. And be it further that we reject the retrograde ideologies, xenophobic biases, and racial bigotries of the so-called alt-right that seek to subvert our government, destabilize society, and infect our political system. And finally, that we earnestly pray both for those who lead and advocate this movement and those who are thereby deceived, that they may see their error through the light of the gospel, repent of their perverse nationalism, and come to know the peace and love of Christ through redeemed fellowship in the kingdom of God, which is established from every nation, tribe, people, and tongue. The leadership of the SBC refused to accept Brother McKissick's resolution, and it caused a lot of kickback. It hurt a lot of people because Southern Baptist is associated with racism. That's just a fact. And it's associated with racism because it was one of the most racist neo-Christian theologies and doctrines in the South. And as I've said to you before, as recently as 2017, you perhaps need to think for yourself. It if it has changed or if it's just okay. So here are the issues. When we observe neo-Christianity and we look at the Baptists, for example, they did not apologize for their role in slavery until 1995. 1995. Now that's amazing to me. In other words, we didn't do anything wrong. Biblical Christianity accepts everybody, regardless of pigmentation, regardless of ethnicity, nationality, culture, regardless of sex. Biblical Christianity, apostolic Christianity, the Christianity that the Messiah was ordained to convey to the apostles by God himself, that the apostles evangelized to disciples known as the Nazarene, included everybody. Everybody was equal. There is no Jew, no Greek. There is no free, nor bond, male, female, for we are all one in the body of the anointed. Neo-Christianity claim this creed and has never lived up to it and will never live up to it. So the question that you ask about Christianity being a racist theology and doctrine, neo-Christianity is certainly built upon racism. We have many brothers and sisters, friends, and family members that are neo-Christians, and they are great people. They're excellent people. They are just ignorant in many respects to the foundation of their doctrine. Let's move on to something else. Let's look at Pentecostalism. Pentecostals represent perhaps the fastest and the largest group of evangelical, charismatic, neo-Christians in the world. There's a lot of them. But again, they are formed from a racist theology, Southern Methodism. You have the Southern Methodists and, Northern Methodists. They split just as the Southern Baptists and the Northern Baptists split. The Methodist says, look, black people are subhuman beings. They are servile beings. They should be enslaved. They are not better than us. They are less than every nation upon the face of the earth. This comes from Methodism. This carried over to a degree to what emerged in 1900 as Pentecostalism, started by Charles Parham and William J. Seymour. William J. Seymour was a black Methodist. He splits here with Charles Parham after they introduce a new denomination in neo-Christianity called Pentecostalism. Why do they split? Because during the Azusa Street ministry in Los Angeles, we have black people and white people coming together. Woohoo! It's a beautiful thing. Well, it wasn't so beautiful to some white people. And because of this, it placed a hard rift between Parham and Seymour. Why? Because we are looking at neo-Christianity inclusive to a degree. In other words, white people are here, black people are down here. They're never here. Quite frankly, this is still embedded in the psyche of neo-Christianity today. So then we move forward to the Holiness Church. The Holiness Church, I tell you what, let's look at this. This is a denomination that was founded by Phoebe Palmer. There's approximately maybe 12 million, a little bit more. This is what one of the evangelists, Alma White, writes about the Pentecostal church, right? I just want you, she was like the first female bishop, very revered in the 19th century, a powerhouse evangelist, neo-Christian, God-fearing, God-loving, Jesus-serving evangelist. I want you to hear it from her. It is here the demonology, which is perhaps more of interest than the sectarian squabbles between those who sat in church and those who stood up and began dancing and drooling and making a mockery of Pentecost. She is basically rebuffing the practices that she sees within Pentecostalism. Here, the pillar of fire indicates the general belief in two tenets that perhaps are today mostly absent within Methodism and largely absent elsewhere as well. First, that demons were everywhere, rapidly increasing in force, led by a somewhat personalized Satan, and were generally capable of beguiling the faithful, not just the faithless. And indeed, put more effort into the former out of spite and wretchedness. Second, here we go, that the black race was descended from the cursed people of Canaan. And this made sense since a black man first introduced the Pentecostal movement to the Californian region. In this slightly eugenic approach, however, the Methodists exonerate largely this race, which they label as having a sort of curse from birth. Talking about Methodism, how Methodist views black people. So it's no longer just how Pentecostals view black people, although Pentecostalism was started by Charles Parham and William J. Seymour. Parham still had embedded in his mind that black people were a cursed people, a cursed race. They're coming out of the Methodist community. Methodism sees black people, right, as a cursed people, a cursed race. Where does it come from? It comes from the 6th century AD, and it is advanced by the Japhetic Jewish clergy. It is advanced by the Neo-Christian clergy of the 7th century, 8th century, 9th century AD, all the way up to the 20th century AD. It's still embedded in the minds of many clergymen today of the Anglo-Saxon persuasion, the Caucasian white persuasion. But it's so embedded where it is a subconscious psychological disposition. And it comes out by way of, adverse conditions. Then you will see these things slowly materialize, manifest itself verbally, right? So I attended perhaps one of the most conservative, seminaries in the world, in my belief, one of the Southern seminaries. And I can tell you for a fact, many of my professors held some very racist sentiments without question. But you're not there to argue their socio-ideological, racial views and so forth. You have another agenda. So I'm not speaking hypothetically. I'm not conjecturing. I'm speaking as a black Jewish male, a Morea teacher of Messianic Synodicism. And I'm telling you how we got here today. Again, this is not a theory. These are facts, because this is something I've studied for many years. Thus, it's an excellent question that many people just don't have an answer to. I'm providing you with the answer. I'll continue. Let me back up. In their slightly eugenic approach, however, the Methodists exonerate largely this race, which they label as having a sort of curse from birth, indicating that it was neither the fault of the then modern black population, nor something that could not be overcome by proper Christian instruction, of course, of a Methodist branch. If you're going to be instructed as to how to civilize your blackness, it needs to be taught by Methodist clergy. It should be noted that the author and founder of the Pillar was the first female bishop in the United States, and while virtually religious, was also a feminist and a strong supporter of the Ku Klux Klan movement. Jehovah's Witnesses, started by Charles Taze Russell again in the 19th century AD. What does he have to say about black people? Do we have any contribution coming from the Restorationist movement, which would consist of the Seventh-day Adventist Restoration, Messianic Judaism, Restorationist movement, Jehovah's Witness, Worldwide Church of God, Restoration? In other words, they're looking at Anglicanism, evangelicalism. They're looking at all of this Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox, and they're saying this is not the Christianity of the Bible. We need to go back and teach the Christianity of the Bible. So let's look at what Charles Taze Russell has to say about this. The curse which Noah pronounced upon Canaan was the origin of the black race. Certain it is that when Noah said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren," he pictured the future of the colored race. They have been and are a race of servants. But now in the dawn of the 20th century, we are all coming to see this matter of service in its true light and to find that the only real joy in life is in serving others, not bossing them. There is no servant in the world as good as a good colored servant, and the joy that he gets from rendering faithful service is one of the purest joys there is in this world. This is from one of their magazines called The Golden Age, July 24th, 1972, page 702. Racism is interwoven in the fabric of this country. Racism is interwoven in the fabric of every neo-Christian denomination in the world. This is its genesis. Before these denominations emerged, they splintered from the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church had this doctrine in its system before Martin Luther split. So they carry this particular doctrine with them each time they split. The Watchtower states, "A little while, and the millennial kingdom will be inaugurated, which will bring restitution to all mankind, restitution to the perfection of mind and body, feature and color to the grand original standard, which God declared very good, and which was lost for a time through sin, by which is soon to be restored by the powerful kingdom of the Messiah." In other words, black people, hold on. Your white pigmentation will return. The curse will reverse. You're going to be just like us. You're going to be white. And we're going to celebrate when that happens. When we read in the Bible, brothers and sisters, we read that the Shulamite woman is black. She was a very dark complected woman who had become blacker because she was left in the fields to work. When we look at Jeremiah and we look at Job, we look at Simon Simon Niger in Acts chapter 13, I believe it is. When you look at the Sudanese that comes up from or what's called the Ethiopian eunuch who's coming up from Sudan in Acts chapter 7. All of these are black Jews. There are 33 different shades of blackness, to blue black, to very light black. But we're all human beings. When you look at the Zondervan's Pictorial Bible Dictionary, edited by Merle C. Tenney, again, published around 1930, he is saying that the Hamites are the progenitor of the black races, but not the Negroes. What does that mean? It means that although Ham is the progenitor, of the black races, not the Negroes. Many Hebrews have understood this to mean that the Negroes were not considered to be a Hamitic people, and many Negroes are not, so I'll give you that. Therefore, they fall in the Yaphetic clans, the white European clans, or they fall in the Shemitic clans. Well, yes, many Negroes do fall in the Shemitic clans, and archaeology and anthropology and historians and have proven that. They have written on this extensively, and so I can certainly offer you that data. But this is the point that I'm making. When Merle C. Tenney edited his book, the Zondervan's Pictorial Bible Dictionary, what he was intending to convey is the sentiments of his day, that the Negro does not emanate or originate from the human race. They are a sub-race people. They are an inhuman group of people. And so again, this is in the 1930s. These are Christian evangelicals, neo-Christian evangelicals that's propagating this. Look at this. You have Jehovah's Witnesses, as I stated before, telling black people when the Messiah returns, you're going to turn back white. Something to celebrate. This is not biblical, and this is not biblical Christianity. So to answer your question, yes, neo-Christianity is a racist doctrine, and its racism really began to develop around the 8th, 9th, 10th century AD in the Eastern Orthodox, the Catholic, and then the Protestant churches as it is today. It is a very unbiblical doctrine. Neo-Christianity has so many false flaws, fallacies, and indiscretions. Quite frankly, they are innumerable. Mormonism. There's a little growth populace of black folks in Mormonism. Let's look at this. Mormonism started by Joseph Smith. Rocks approximately 15 million adherents. I think it's more than this. Their organization is worth over $100 billion. Interesting. This is what he writes. You see some classes of the human family that are black, uncouth, uncomely, disagreeable, and low in their habits, wild and seemingly deprived of nearly all the blessings of the intelligence that is generally bestowed upon mankind. Cain slew his brother. Cain might have been killed, and that would have put a termination to that line of human beings. This was not to be, and the Lord put a mark upon him, which is the flat nose and black skin. Where do we find in the Bible that Cain was cursed black? Where do we find in the Bible that Cain was cursed with a flat nose or big nose, big lips? Where do we find this, brothers and sisters? It's not present. And again, scholars have already concluded, I read Hebrew, and I have concluded that we have a mistranslation that is inserted in the side note, if you will, in the Adam books that brings about a Cain narratives. We have so many fallacies within this theory, it's beyond ridiculous. What am I saying? What I am saying, in fact, is that when you read the text, we're going to see that Cain's seed did not even survive the flood. Shem's seed survived the flood. And so when scholars recognize this, that we have several hundred years of error, they then transition the theory to Ham, right? Being the origin of the black curse race. So Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Methodism, Holiness, Pentecostals, Episcopalians, Roman Catholics, this is their doctrine as it relates to the black race alone. It's wrong, it's unrighteous, it's hurtful. What's even more hurtful is that we have so many black people that are part of these racist neo-Christian organizations, and we're talking about how it was from its inception. We are not marginalizing or disparaging in any way, shape, or form our white, Anglo-Saxon, Caucasian, Yaphetic, European brothers who lead these organizations or who participate in them. By no stretch of the imagination. These are good people, but the doctrine is wrong. The institution is wrong. If we have a tree that has come up and that tree begins to bear bad fruit, and the fruit that it is bearing is approximately 80% bad, then we have to remove that tree, plant another tree. You cannot paint this tree a different color. You cannot strip it of its bark. You cannot pluck all the fruit up and says it's just a different tree. It's going to continue to bear the same fruit. You cannot say, well, I'm going to put something on it. I'm going to dress it up. I'm going to paint it, whatever. It's still the same tree. The only way that you can change the nomenclature is by planting another tree. You have to destroy the tree. And so, yeah, we are looking forward to the return of the Messiah, to explicate the truth that he evangelized, in the first century, that he commissioned and commanded the apostles to evangelize in the first century. Because what we have today is not what the apostles, is not what the Messiah died for. The Christianity that we see today. I know that this is a very hurtful topic, but it's one that's really deserving of a response. Arya, are you saying in a nutshell that really and truly blacks are not welcomed in neo-Christian churches? No, I'm not saying that at all. Many of them lead in these neo-Christian or white-led churches. They have formed an alliance and partnership and so forth. But what I'm saying is that racial programming is still there. I hate to tell you that. It's still there. It may not be as overt. It may not be as candid as it was in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century. But without a doubt, it's still there. You have to remember, in America, what is white is right. That's just the reality. It shouldn't be that way. Righteousness and truth is what is right, and that has no color, that has no pigmentation. How do we get there? We can't. Not in this system, not in this era, because those who lead us in this country, many of them, not all, many of them still retain that racial indoctrination that began in the 6th century AD. I hope this answers your question. Feel free to give us a phone call at 704-553-7625. You can visit our website at www.nccischarlotte.com. Continue to write in. I'd love to answer your questions. May the blessings of Yah be with you. Shalom.